Hi there, I'm Lucas Kendall. This is my friend Charlie Vignola, and we're here for another hour of our Screenplay talk show. And I know what you're thinking. Why should I spend 1 second listening to these guys I've never heard of talk about screenwriting? And it's because we can actually give you real information about the business that would help you. So today, what Charlie and I thought we'd talk about would be the giant ecosystem of economics that is how things work. And we can talk about all the different players, from directors to producers to agents to managers, and how they try to make money. And then you can see how it all circulates. It'll be like that great speech in Network, where you have messed with the forces of nature and you will atone.
Classic.
The classic. Yes. And also it's a lot like Follow the Money. And let's see if Charlie gets this. Who actually said follow the money?
Watergate?
Yeah.
That was, follow the money to find out exactly who's responsible for the Watergate break-in. Yeah.
But the reason I mention it is because Deep Throat never actually said follow the money. William Goldman said follow the money. And Al Halbrook said it as Deep Throat, and that's why everybody thinks Deep Throat says it. So that's the power of great writing.
Yes, and the power of Hal Holbrook, great actor.
And Bill Goldman. So let's do this. And I thought I could start out by talking about how writers think they'll make money, which is they think I'll write a script, I'll somehow inject it into Hollywood by winning a screenplay contest or something, and then they'll go, wow, that's amazing, and then I'll write you a giant check, and then you're famous.
Yeah,
and of course it doesn't.
It would be wonderful if it worked that way. It would be wonderful.
It might work that way like once or twice a year or every other
year. Yeah. I mean, look, there's somebody, again, who wins the lottery every week or every other week, but that's why they call it the lottery. That's not how it usually works. And as Lucas and I have mentioned on some of these podcasts, with very few exceptions, these contests don't get the attention of people like me. I spent 3 decades looking for material for Jerry Bruckheimer films, and the amount of times that I was looking for that material amongst the winners of contests was like this. It didn't happen. Now, sometimes the Nickel Fellowship that we mentioned, which is a screenwriting contest that's run by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, that's a real one. And people who wind up winning that get agents, and they wind up getting into the business, and their material winds up getting circulated and sent to people like myself. Maybe Austin, but these days there's dozens, if not hundreds, of screenwriting contests, and I can assure you that when it comes to mainstream Hollywood people like me, that's not where we're looking for material. So if you're laboring under the impression that I'm going to find you amongst those those contests, even if you're the winner of those contests, it's not likely to happen.
And it comes down to having a good enough idea and a good enough script that they take it seriously. But it's extremely rare for a civilian to come up with a good enough idea, let alone a good enough script of that idea. But it does happen, but it's usually people who have been working a long time. They might already be in the business as an assistant. But people, if they're watching this, they may have discovered this through Reddit or through Facebook groups about screenwriting. So they sort of know this, but the more likely way that they would sort of break in would be if a manager likes something of theirs well enough to take on. And so here's where we should tell, I think, the truth about, well, we can back up and say that the more likely way a writer will make money is that they can hook up with a manager and they can start to do meetings, and they can maybe sell a new idea or work with the manager to come up with an idea, or maybe if they're going to do television, they can get the crummiest television staffing job. But it's all long shots, and it's all a ton of work. It's just pounding the pavement and a ton of work and writing and rewriting. And during that time, if you're not independently wealthy or have someone supporting you, there's no money coming in. So it's hard stuff. But you would, as a writer, need to be able to generate commercial content. Yeah. Unless you're able to create things yourself, because you're able to hustle to raise money from dentists or whatever. So if you get to the manager, what the managers won't say on these interviews, that is 95% of what drives them, is they want to make money.
Yeah, if you're not already aware of the fact that it's called show business, it's all about making money, and the only reason that any representative is going to want to work with you or give you any attention whatsoever is because he thinks you're capable of getting in a room and convincing them to hire you as a writer, or that you have come up with an idea that's so great you could possibly sell it in a pitch. And even if you do that, you have to have a writing sample that's good enough so that the people that you're pitching to can read it and go, okay, well, it was a good idea, and I can see he can execute the idea. So yeah, a lot of people like to say that ideas are not that important. They're incredibly important in Hollywood. They're super important. That was the thing that I looked for 30 years. I'm looking for the great ideas. Now, executing the great idea is obviously also very important. It should be axiomatic that yes, you can have a great idea, but you also need to try to find a way to execute the idea. But you can sell it in a pitch. But again, catch 22, you can't get in a room to pitch if you haven't already written a writing sample that's good enough that convinces the manager to put you in a room with people that are relying on that manager's good taste going forward in the future. And you're not going to be able to get in a room and sell an idea if you've never written a screenplay that proves you can execute the idea that you're trying to pitch. Simple.
So you can, in fact, if you do well enough in a contest or with one of those coverage sites, if they kick it out to managers they know, but people should know that they're not going to just kick out the script. They're not just going to send an email, hey guys, read this, it's awesome. What they're going to do is say, hey, we have a script that we recommend, or a group of them, and these are the log lines.
Right.
So the point is that it all is going to bottleneck with the strength of the log line of your script. Because
Yes.
you could win everything, but if the log line is lame, they'll probably, they're less likely to give it a chance, because there is such a thing as something with a very soft log line, but it's so brilliantly written and such a unique voice and so forth and so on, that they would then take that third-party endorsement of the coverage place and say, okay, I'll give it a shot. It's just harder. If you have the great log line, you don't even need the contest or the coverage place, because you could just send 100 emails to these managers. You can get their email addresses off IMDb Pro or from other lists that people have curated. And you just say, hi, do you want to read this? And it shouldn't be a long, we'll put in the, I'll put in the YouTube description.
In the program notes.
Yeah, in the program notes, a guide. There's a manager named John Zalzirni, his company is Bellevue, and he made, there's a PDF of like all his wit and wisdom that he put on Twitter about how to query people. And so I'll just put that in the link. And that's everything you need to know. But you need to know that the last thing they want to do is like, ooh, a brilliant talent that I can sculpt and mold. I mean, they do want to do that, but they need you to be able to generate, and they need you to be able to be collaborative. And when they say, hey, dummy, don't write, we're not going to write the $200 million sci-fi epic. We're going to write, this weird thing, because this is what I know I can sell. These guys, here's a point, maybe you'll probably agree, that the industry is a bunch of people who talk to each other. And there are a lot of phonies who couldn't write their way out of a paper bag. I'm not picking on anybody in particular. It's just true that there are people who are good at being social, and they're good at knowing what they can push without really knowing how to make it. So people in the business sort of develop a sense of what they can push up the hierarchy, what the junior executive can bring to the producer, what the producer can bring to a studio, what the studio can bring to an agent. They have this sort of radar, and they want something that pings on their radar. You can speak more to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously it's important to be good in a room. Not every writer is going to be like entertaining and able to vamp in a room, but all things being equal, you'd rather be good at being social when you're having a meeting with these executives and have them like you, because people want to hire people they like. People don't want to hire people who are like too quiet or too weird or too annoying. They want to find people that they think are nice and cool and friendly and are smart and articulate, and yes, have good ideas. I mean, you'll hear Lukas and I keep circling back to this idea, but you need to constantly be generating really good ideas, because you never know when you're going to have an opportunity to run into somebody somewhere and they're like, oh, what are you working on? And if you're fumbling trying to figure out how to describe the thing you're working on too long, then their brain will just float away like a balloon. but
But
you
we should
need,
also be clear that there's a lot to learn socially about the right and wrong time to do that. I mean, if they ask
yeah,
you, that's
yes.
golden. But if you're in an elevator with Spielberg, you don't just, hey, because
No,
you'll get a
there's a
very
time,
polite.
there's a time
Right.
and a place. And obviously, if you're given the opportunity, if somebody asks you the question, so what are you working on? What's next? What are you working on? Have an answer, and have the answer be something that's so novel and dynamic and intriguing and fascinating that the person wants to read the script because they've just heard the idea.
But most of the people that might be watching this are going to be all over the world. They don't know film people,
Right,
so
right.
that's
That's
never
true.
going to happen.
That's true.
And so no, but so the people out in the world, they have to rely on these contests and these coverage places. Although you can, if you're on Twitter, sort of participate in discussions with some managers, and then maybe if they get to know you, if someone says I'm having a rough day, and if you're nice and say, oh, I'm sorry about that, as opposed to, you loser. It's a really fine line between having enough personality to get noticed on Twitter without just being a jerk. And
Yeah, it is a fine line, and many of us have to go through a lot of hard knocks to figure that out. But if you're a nice person, if you're a decent person, look, they want to hear good ideas. They
well,
they 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 want to hear the next thing I can try to go sell, because their whole job is trying to sell a product. They need the new product to sell. So you have to be working on figuring out ways to do it in a nice, clean, concise way, either through a query letter or if you have a chance to talk to them personally.
but
But
I should add
yeah,
that in my experience, and this referring to myself, all the times I thought I'm ready, I have sellable material, not even close.
right,
So probably like a 95 to 99 to 100% chance that the material that you think you have, that you think if only I could get someone consequential to read this, I'll have a career. It's probably not the case. It's probably your stuff is here and you've got to get way up to here. And that mystery of how to get there, the truth is, it's quite likely you'll never get there just because it's so hard and it requires so much imagination and diligence and persistence and creativity that we're not all meant to be successful at everything. I've said this before, I love baseball. I was never going to be a professional baseball player. I was never even going to be a college baseball player. It's not in my body to do it. And that's something that is, our heart goes out to people who are trying to do something where what do you call it, your reach exceeds your grasp. But you
yeah,
can
screenwriting is the impossible dream, right?
yeah.
It's something that a lot of people, the amount of people you meet and hear them say I have a great idea for a screenplay, it's a cliche, right? Or people who say I have a screenplay, even that's a cliche. But the reason that hope springs eternal is because you know everybody can maybe come up with one great idea, but the trick is to be able, if you're going to like try to make a living as a writer, you can't just have one great idea. You have to have many, and you have to be able to find ways to work on the idea, to create a way to execute it, whether it's a script, whether it's a treatment, whether it's a verbal pitch, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a book, a comic book. There are a number of different ways to find a way to express this creative idea that you have. So screenwriting is certainly one of them, and this is what the podcast is about, or the YouTube show, whatever we're calling this. But yeah, the idea is that you have to train yourself, and we'll do this in a future show. Where do you get those great ideas? How do you develop those great ideas? Where do you start? How do I even know? But the managers that we're talking about that are looking for material, they before they even are going to read the material, they're going to want to hear, well, what are your ideas? And if your ideas are like, ugh, they're not going to even bother with your script. So you just wasted 6 months.
Yeah, if your idea is there's a guy who has a cafe and needs money for it, it's just like, or friends take a road trip to the beach and their dad dies. It's just, those could be real movies. But if, when Robin Wright says she wants to make that movie, people are like, okay, I want to read it, because you trust that this is a creative, lifelong, professional person who is also Robin Wright. But if nobody has a soft idea, it's just, you're behind the 8 ball. But the point about getting from here to here, and maybe you can do it, maybe you can't. I think everybody who's diligent could probably educate themselves to the level of being a hack. I mean, to be crass about it. But there's also something to be said for great ideas can come from people who don't know how to execute them. And
Right.
people, I mean, we all have our God-given gifts, and we say that as hardcore atheists, but we all have what we're good at. And I've read great ideas from people out of nowhere where it's like, dude, that is an awesome idea. And then you read the script, and the script is, you know, you couldn't make one page of it. But if you restructured it, we'll talk about this another time, but you need to know that managers, they want an idea that they can sell. They want an idea that you go, ideally an idea with a script that they can give some notes, they can fix it up, and then they can take it out and they can start to create a commodity out of you that they then get money from. Managers are producers with no money.
Yes, and managers will also, agents can't do this, but managers can do this.
Yeah.
Managers can attach themselves as producers to projects. And, you know, in terms of what managers make on your sale, they can make up to 15%. A lot of managers will then refund you that money if the movie gets made and they wind up getting a producer's fee. So that's a thing that a lot of managers do and agents don't.
Right. So like, if you want to be a movie producer, you have to have the material, the connections to talent, or the money. And if you don't have the money, and you only get the connections to talent if you have the material, like, so where do you get the material? If I want to be a producer, a way to do that is to be a manager, because then I can find ideas. If I have enough experience and expertise to work with these cretins, you know, and try and make it into something I can sell. That's why a lot of managers are managers, but they are, if you're wondering like, why'd this guy ghost me? Or why this person just suddenly, you know, say, I don't care anymore. It's because they probably floated your idea, figured out, you know, nobody liked it, and they dropped you because they don't make money by teaming up with writers they can't sell. They make money by selling stuff. Some of them are like, they're in that to produce, and as soon as they can dump the management, they will gladly dump it and just keep the people who are incoming call people. That's the dream.
Let's also bring this up, which is, let's say you're lucky enough to get a manager. Somehow by hook or by crook, you came up with a script that was so well written and an idea that was so interesting that a manager now wants to represent you. There's a honeymoon period, whether it's with a manager or with an agent. And that honeymoon period could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So they're all hyped, excited about you. It's a new piece of material that I can go out there and sell. You're a new product. This is like the newest, latest. This is cool. But if you don't get any traction within 3 months or 6 months, or, you know, maybe moving in on a year, then, you know, you probably won't hear from your manager, you know, so often anymore. And he won't be so quick to return your phone calls because, like, there is a window of excitement.
It happened to me, and it was my fault because the material wasn't there.
Yeah. But this will happen. It's not, it might happen. It will definitely happen. And the thing is, there are some people who are, you know, better writers or luckier or whatever. And it's like, as soon as you get an agent or a manager, and they put you in a room or they send your material out there, you hit the ground running. They might buy it. They might option it. They might like it enough to like hire you for a writing assignment. They want to hear pitches. They might put you on a writing staff, you know, but then there are many, probably most writers who get picked up by a manager, and like, as much promise as there initially was, for whatever reason, people are not buying what you're selling. They were optimistic that was going to work out, and it just doesn't happen. And you sort of like, so you are represented technically, you know, and you send them new material, but you know, the bloom is worn off the rose, and that happens a lot.
It sucked. Yeah. It happened to me, and I became annoying about it because my guy was not reading my stuff, and I was like, well, what's the point of this? And he got annoyed with me, and finally, but I won't talk about my particular case, but people are passive aggressive. They'll just keep you hanging there. They'll just kind of ice you out, but like, well, he might come up with something cool and I want to still get that money. They won't. People, how should we say this? Like, there's honorable behavior and there's dishonorable behavior, and everybody acts on a continuum. as much as I like to think that I behave honorably, I'm a continuum and I've done sucky things. I'm sure we all have. Some people are really kind of blatant about it because, they're jerks. And it's an environment where kind of so many people do this, you kind of think, well, he'll land on his feet. It doesn't, I can't do it. So people do behave dishonorably. And I think it's dishonorable to keep someone strung along when you have no real intention of working with them anymore. But I know that people have the bad experience of trying to break up with them and then they get yelled at. It's like,
Yeah.
Then you don't want to. So if I even have the courtesy of dumping someone to their face and then they're screaming at me, it's like, maybe I should just let them linger. I don't, and also.
And for a second, let's just, do a role reversal. If that was your job, okay, your job is, I'm only going to eat. I'm only going to make, money to pay my bills. If I can get Hollywood to want to do deals with these people that I represent. So in all earnest, the people that I think are the most talented, I'm going to send them out there. I'm going to make the phone calls. I'm going to put in the legwork and I'm going to push them through the door. And then it's up to them. And if they can do it, great. We both eat. Like, I only make 10-15% of what you make. So it's like, I have every vested interest to want you to succeed. But if for whatever reason, you're just not making it work and people are not responding to the ideas and they're not responding to the writing, what would you do? Would you continue to drill for, water in a place you're not getting any water? Or are you going to go to the places where there is water? So you're going to go to the writers who are getting work and you're going to focus your time on them because you have a limited, amount of hours every day. So it's like, again, and I agree with Lucas, there's a nice way to do that and there's a jerk way to do that. That's a completely different thing, obviously. I'm just saying psychologically, you understand why they're doing what they're doing.
There's some managers who want to be producers and they're pretty blatant about it. And there are others who really genuinely love the talent management part of it. And they don't really want all the hassles of producing. And I have to say that the manager I mentioned, John Zauzirny, he's read me in past, was always very professional. He's been very honorable. And he says outright, like, if he brings the idea, then he produces. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. So some man, or there may be some subtleties to that I'm forgetting, but it seemed like very clear. Whereas I know a lot of managers, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I'm the producer. It's like, excuse me, who are you? And then.
Oh wait, so this is interesting, Lucas. So you're saying this particular manager attached himself to be a producer if he brought the idea that you're writing? What does
Yes,
that
he
mean?
has,
Like,
and there was, there's a movie called Infinite.
Yeah.
Remember here, that was something that he talked about at length on Twitter because that was a piece of IP that he, the manager, optioned and found and collaborated with one of his friends and clients and writers to create the script that then became the movie. And in that case,
so the idea didn't originate with the screenwriter. It originated with the manager who then found a screenwriter to execute the idea. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, more or less. So that's a legitimate case of that to me is legitimate for the manager to be a producer. But there are a lot of managers, and I won't mention them, who, they've got their vanity card on their movies and TV shows because that's how they will make way more money as a producer on that project than getting 10% of the writer.
That's right.
And they like to make money because what we're trying to say is that everybody needs to make money, probably wants to make money, probably really likes to make money. I wouldn't turn it down. I mean, I want to make money, but it's very hard. And there's a limited pool of money and there's a whole ecosystem and how the money flows. And there's, I thought we could mention, like, you as a studio, as a production executive, you made money because you were on salary and that was your job. But I mean, you made the most money if you could find an awesome project and then maybe you'd get a bonus or get promoted.
Right.
So your incentive was in doing a great job. And I won't specifically say, but like your boss is a producer of that caliber who's made a ton of money. I mean, he makes his money by making high profile movies and attaching super high profile stars and having monstrous budgets and making billion-dollar franchises for giant conglomerates. Yeah. And independent producers who aren't managers, they make money by, well, this is interesting too, because a lot of times, so if if a writer gets something optioned, they're like, oh, I got an option. It's like you're probably not going to see more than the $500 or whatever the token amount is, because
Yeah.
you're counting on this independent producer to then use his or her network and contacts to get the movie made. And that really, then you're talking about talent. How things really get made in this town is when talent says yes.
Yes.
So can you talk about that? Because you were in the position at a
Yeah.
huge company to get directors and talent to say yes. What was
Yeah,
that?
and we didn't, and we didn't always get the first choice that we had. In fact, we almost never did. You know, you could be literally the biggest producer in the world, and at the end of the day, you're still subject to the vagaries of other people's schedules. Like, you know, we wanted to make a sequel to Top Gun for a long time. We make it when Tom Cruise is ready to make it. You know, I mean, on some level, yes, the script has to be ready to go, but the reality is the movie gets made when Tom has an availability in his schedule and he wants to make it. Same thing with, you know, we tried to develop a sequel to Bad Boys for a long time after Bad Boys 2 came out in, you know, the early aughts, like 2002, I think. And, you know, went through a million iterations, a million different versions of Bad Boys 3. And, you know, ultimately Bad Boys 3 gets made when Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are ready to make Bad Boys 3. That's when the movie gets made. And then suddenly all the focus, all the attention is thrown at the movie. You find the writers and you make the movie at that point. Now, so really they drive the show. And it's directors too, obviously, if you
What
get
do
to
they
go
want?
direct your movie.
But
What's that?
we can speculate as to what they want.
Yeah. What do they want? What do the actors want? The
Yeah,
actors.
what do directors want?
Oh, well, you know, directors want something that they all want something they think is going to be commercial, that people or audiences are going to want to see, right? Now, occasionally it'll be about, like, there's a project I've always wanted to get made, and finally I get that project made, and that happens. And in fact, there are certain shadier producers who used to make movies like that with A-level stars 15, 20 years ago. You know, they would find, what is that one project that, you know, Sylvester Stallone or Kevin Costner or somebody wanted to make, and nobody would make it. They'll make the movie. But for the most part, you know, they're driven by the same desires as everybody, which is they want something that they respond to, that they think they could be good in, something that they think audiences are going to want to see. Although there are, you know, personal projects, like with, let's go back to Will Smith, Pursuit of Happiness would be an example. Right? That's a story that really resonated with Will. It was something that he wanted to make for a while. It was a great true life story. And so the strength of Will Smith gets that made. Does that movie get made if Will doesn't want to make it? A lot harder. Because it's just not, you know, the most commercial idea for a movie. But, you know, his weight thrown behind it, that helps.
And but we should say there is something specific that stars want when they're choosing their projects, was they're choosing their director.
Yes. There are times when a director, like, might be on before. I'm sorry, when a star might be on a project before a director comes along. That's the other thing. There's no right answer to this. Sometimes there's a star from the beginning, and then you find the director. Sometimes the director comes on, and then you find the star. It varies. But if the star is big enough, then the star certainly gets to influence and who gets hired as a director, how the director does their job, you know, if the star is big enough, and that could lead to some, you know, potential contention on the set about the creative direction of how things go. Yeah, the bigger the star, the more creative influence they're going to want over all the different aspects of the film, from the screenwriting to the directing to the marketing, all that kind of stuff. But and again, you want that as a screenwriter because you want to get your project made. So it's like, sometimes just be careful what you wish for. I want a big star, so because I want the movie to be greenlit. Well, maybe the star wants to rewrite the script himself, or maybe the star has a friend who he wants to rewrite the screenplay for him, and then suddenly they rewrite everything a month before you shoot. That happens plenty of times, but that is key, and therefore they can name their price. You know, there's a handful of stars in the business. I'd say these days it's like, you know, Ryan Reynolds would be an example, or, you know, Bradley Cooper. There's a handful of people who can pick and choose what projects, and same thing with actresses. So those people really drive what gets made certainly more than, scripts or directors. It's a cliche that there's a ton of great scripts that don't get made, right? I mean, there are not as many as you think, but there are, like, some. And they might float around Hollywood for like 10, 15 years, and then finally they get made. Passengers was a good example of that. That was a screenplay that went through a lot of permutations over the years. Keanu Reeves was attached to it and controlled it for a while, bounced around Hollywood for a long, 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 long time. Everybody loved it. Finally got made with what you would have thought at the time was the biggest possible stars in the universe. Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, like, on paper, you can't do bigger than that. And what happened after all that time and all that waiting? The movie finally gets made, and didn't come out as well as maybe some people had hoped. But it took a long circuitous path to finally getting made, and then it finally got made with these big stars. So that's another way that these things come together.
We should also mention that agents have a job, which is to extract as much money as possible for their clients so that they get their cut, and they don't care if it bleeds the productions.
Yes, that's true. And as many people out there probably know, there was a huge, sort of strike where basically the Writers Guild decided that they were going to tell all of their writers to disconnect from the agencies, because the agencies were making a lot of money on these packages that they wouldn't be 100% honest with their writers about. And they would wind up making more money from the package than they would from, like, doing the rightful duty to represent the writers. And so for a big, long period of time, basically writers were working without the agencies. This is only a year or two ago, right before COVID, really. So there's a lot of contention there, because agents have a reputation for being these rapacious sharks and putting together these packages. And, it's, the reputation is well earned. They're tough hombres. But yes, they're just agents are there to make money, like everybody in the ecosystem is there to make money.
So it all revolves around money, and you have weird personal relationships where it's like, oh, my friend, and you're my friend, and people use the language of friends. It was very mob-like,
Yes, that's a polite way to say
and,
it.
and I'm becoming concerned that people would watch this and go, this guy is so cynical. I would never want to work with this guy.
Yep.
Did I blow it? Did I go too far?
No. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just getting an interesting email.
Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. Let's pause it for Charlie's email.
No. It's okay. It's actually from an industry contact. It's related to what we're talking about, oddly enough. Anyway, sorry. Rewind. What was the question again, Lucas? Sorry. Go ahead.
Do I sound too cynical that you think people go, I don't want to work with this guy because he seems like such a jerk?
Oh, about you?
Yeah.
About yourself?
Aren't I wonderful?
I think that you're being candid in a way that people would find bracing, and you're not telling enough off-color jokes that people would not want to work with you. So I think you're okay. No,
but I mean, look, I'm sure that, and because I'm 47 years old, I know that I have a personality that some people really respond to, and other people don't. So, but it is.
And Lucas, and I will say on your behalf again, for people who didn't watch the show like one or two episodes ago, I did read one of Lucas's TV pilots, and it was exceptionally good. And I'm not just saying that because I'm friends with Lucas, because Lucas knows that if I didn't like it, I would be very blunt about it and tell him the truth.
If you weren't honest, I wouldn't respect you.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, like, the guy that you're listening to right here, he is a talented screenwriter. He knows his stuff, and he knows from whence he speaks.
Well, but I wanted to just make fun of the whole business and see if there were any repercussions towards me, because look, you meet people, and an old friend of mine said, look, be careful when anyone uses the words gratitude or loyalty, because they're the ones that, like, the knife will,
Oh boy, really?
It's like, don't you see on, like, social media, the people who are always talking about how much they love their wife? It's like, tell your wife, don't tell Twitter. And they're always the ones getting divorced.
That is true. Look, it's an interesting business. It's a lot of interesting big personalities that get into it, and there's a high tolerance for eccentric behavior if you can perform, if you're talented. You, whether you're an actor, a director, a writer, an agent, if you are good at what you do, then you can get away with behavior that would never be tolerated anywhere else. Again, look at what happened the Oscars the other week. You can literally belt a guy live on stage in front of a billion people, and a few minutes later, you can get the biggest honor in the business. Now, granted, as we've now learned, there were repercussions from that, but yeah, it's a business where certain people have terrible reputations. It's harder to get away with it, I would say, now in this sort of social media saturated age than it used to be. Somebody like Scott Rudin can get away with his behavior for literally decades, like just the worst behavior possible. And then, enough people talk to a reporter from New York Magazine, post Me Too, and suddenly, maybe Scott Rudin has to be a little bit more careful about how he behaves than he used to in the bad old days. Scott used to be one of many executives who behaved like that in sort of the 80s and 90s era of Hollywood, but Scott got away with it because his taste was so exceptional, so good. He won Oscars and Tonys, and the guy worked with literally the best of the best writers. And I'm sure those people didn't get the worst of Scott. Those people got the best. They probably said, Scott is the most lovely person in the world. He is so, so collaborative and so supportive. It was just the support staff that didn't see the best of Scott. The people who had to in their face. Yeah, the people who who worked in his pit crew who didn't get the best of Scott.
Let's continue to follow the money, because we were talking about this before our show, where I was showing you something called the Red List, RED.
Yes.
And I'll explain very briefly that we all know this, there's a huge screenwriting industrial complex. Also, I've heard it called the Hope Factory, which is that there are a lot of companies, and they're for-profit companies that have established businesses and professions for the people who operate and staff them, where they are selling contests and coverage and education services and networking services to people who want to be screenwriters. And I believe that there are a lot of people working at those companies who have good intentions and behave honorably. I also believe there are a lot of people who found and cashed the checks from those companies who really are like predatory. I personally would never do anything like that. Charlie is a $300 an hour script consultant, but he's got the credentials and he's very upfront about what he offers and why he offers it. But what the Red List is something, there's a company called Industry Arts, and they happen to own like 7 or 8 of these related companies, like the Script Lab and Screencraft and Coverfly and We Screenplay. And so it's kind of the thing where it's like, in our neighborhood, we've got a Vons and a Pavilion. So I'm like, do I go to the Vons or the Pavilions? Well, it's owned by the same person. So why, I said, why are you guys across the street from each other? And one of them used to be something else, and it was bought in 1979, but they figured out they'd make more money just having 2 of them than closing it or selling it. Anyway, so these guys have a business model of offering a free site called Coverfly, which is actually very useful because writers can create profiles for themselves. And it's useful to have. You can have all your scripts there in log lines, and there is an interface where, in theory, professionals can browse it looking for material, and they can reach out to you and they can read your stuff. I don't know how often it happens, but so there are several thousand scripts on this Red List, and the way you get on the Red List and the way you keep moving up onto the Red List is by purchasing a lot of products, screenplay, contest entries, coverage entries. And then every time you do that, it kicks you up. So it incentivizes people to pay money on contests of dubious value that they're probably not going to perform very well at, probably because they don't have the material to succeed well at them anyway. And in the meantime, they're like, oh, I'm in the top 15% for my script so-and-so on the horror chart. But it doesn't, it's worthless, it's meaningless. And I pointed out the most interesting thing to you, which is that we could look at this and look at the log lines. If you're number 1 on like their Red List, probably by definition, nobody wants that script because it's been there so long.
Yeah.
Anyway, take it away, Charlie.
No, that's unfortunately, that is true. Like, I mean, I've heard Coverfly mentioned, but only because over the past year or so, I've been looking at Facebook screenwriting groups just because I was curious, and they mentioned these sites. And I never, as a professional in the business for 30 years, it's not like I've ever heard of these sites. So I'm like, oh, all these aspiring screenwriters seem to be mentioning these same half a dozen sites as if they mean something. Like, well, I guess they mean something to aspiring screenwriters. They don't mean anything to people who actually work in the business, because I know I work in the business and I've never been on Coverfly. But I heard the term, and so I found myself looking into these things. But as you just mentioned, um, maybe it gives you an ego boost if you win some of these contests. Maybe it gives you some sense of a way to get some feedback, because you're siloed, living not in Los Angeles, and you want to find some way to share your creative material and feel like you're at least getting some sort of sense of accomplishment out of it. But in terms of like really moving forward your professional career, that's not going to do anything. Like, you probably, in the old days, like when I graduated from college in 1988, and I knew I wanted to work in Hollywood. So, 1988, you moved to LA. You moved to LA because that's where the agencies are. That's where the studios are. That's where they shoot the shows and the Tonight Show and Burbank, and it's all here. So I lived in Florida. I graduated from college. I moved out to Los Angeles. I bought a 1974 Dodge Dart to drive to work for $800 from a retired couple in Burbank, cash. And, I had to figure out a way with really no connections. And by the way, I tried to make connections. I think I mentioned in a previous podcast, when I was in college, I reached out to a filmmaker who made a movie, got them to come to my college, stayed in contact with them. When I moved to LA, I stayed in contact with them. It ultimately, peripherally, I guess, led to my first agent. So I could say that actually, yes. If you look at the dominoes that fell to my first recommendation to an agent, yes, it did come from that connection I made in college. But I proactively made that connection in college, not knowing shit from Shinola about anything.
Well, we talk about swearing, Charlie.
Yeah, sorry, poop from Shinola. So that was the thing. Like, we've talked about this. If you really want to do anything, sing, act, write, you're doing it all the time because that's what you want to do. And so in college, that's all me and my friends did, was we write. When I moved to Los Angeles, because I really wanted to write, I spent my off hours when I wasn't working at crummy jobs writing with my friends, and and getting together and drinking coffee and watching movies. This is what we did. And when all of us came out as college graduates, eventually some of us got in the mailroom at an agency, became an assistant to an executive. And so when that happens, and some of your friends and some of your acquaintances start to get entry-level jobs in the business, what do? You talk to them, you tell them what you're working on. Some of them offer to read it, do give it to them to read. And if the material is of a certain quality after you've rewritten and come up with a million different ideas, eventually a piece of material or an idea or a pitch will be of sufficient quality that one of those people that are now in your network are going to respond to and go, I think I might be able to do something with this. And you don't know who that person is going to be or when that opportunity is going to happen, but you got to be digging a lot of wells to get that water, because it's not going to happen unless you do those things. And so that's when everybody's asking for like the fast pass or secret to success. That's the secret. It's not really a secret. It's the idea that like you have to like work your ass off, working on material, coming up with ideas, meeting as many people as possible, not being a jerk when you do meet them, especially if it's a person in any kind of power, to try to, maintain a relationship with them. This was in the pre-social media days, pre-internet days. And so nowadays, as we've been discussing on this program, you can follow people on Twitter who are professional writers and stars and producers, and you have direct messaging, and you can be friends with them on Facebook. I have friends that I work with that are collaborators, and they have met tons of people on Facebook who they've reached out to, got material to, started working with because of the connections they've made. Not everybody's going to respond to you on social media. In fact, most people won't. But it's a numbers game, just the way it is when you're trying to find somebody to date. You're going to go out there and there's a bunch of people in the bar and you're going to talk to them and you're going to gauge your attractiveness compared to their attractiveness. Hope they're not going to laugh you out of the room. And eventually it'll be a good night. You've had a drink or two and you're feeling like you're looking okay. And you suddenly, score above your pay grade and you're talking to somebody because you're charming and you're nice and it's working out. It's really no different.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because when you're doing that, and thank God I'm married, but I remember
the bad old days of
the bad old days of,
yeah.
It's like you want to be known and loved for who you are. And that's
Yes.
how we feel about our material. But we also have to admit, like, I should buzz these eyebrows, or
Yeah.
I should hit the gym, or I
Yes.
should not be weird, or I should
Yes.
not tell those uncomfortable jokes. I should realize I should go to therapy and know that when I'm being passive aggressive and knock it off. So,
But if you didn't make those mistakes, then there would be no rom-coms, there would be no Woody Allen comedies, there would be none of those things, because we can all appreciate and understand that that's part of being human. Is like learning from your mistakes.
It's about doing the tough, unglamorous work on yourself in order to be viable in the business, in the the marketplace. And it's the exact same thing. Like how you get from here to here. I made some notes about, because I've read a bunch of amateur scripts, and like here's 3 things that I've read so many times that it's like second I see it, it's
Your
like
brain shuts
I'm
off.
gone. I'm gone.
Yeah.
One is like the $200 million fantasy epic about the revolution on the planet Vorgon. Like, never again. The second one is, and it's usually written by men, and for some reason nowadays it's usually starring a female protagonist, the tough girl action movie where it's all like heads exploding, and there's always like description of people falling like meat. They land like hits the ground like meat, where it's just how many different ways can we shoot people. And then comedies where it's so ungrounded that it's basically farce, where every single character in the comedy is so outrageously ridiculous that there's you don't know what anybody wants, and you don't know how you're going to get it because everything is stupid.
Yeah. By the way, Lucas, what is the difference between farce and satire? Can you define that for us?
I know the difference. Satire is
don't look up farce or satire, and is Airplane farce or satire?
Airplane is satire, and Don't Look Up is farce.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Because farce is realistic things where everybody's behaving ridiculously, like The Big Bus.
Or Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah. And satire is where you're doing a parody version of something that's straight.
You're mocking a genre, right? Yeah. Exactly. Okay.
And they're both very, like, yes, it is so hard because when people are writing and all their scripts are down here, it's because it's easy. It's because it's easy not to get into the depth and the truth of your characters. It's easy to make people who are cliches, who don't have real emotional stakes, who don't have real relationships, who don't behave like real people. It is so much work to stop and think, how do I get conflict out of reality as opposed to just making up anything? Because there's so many paradoxes where it is true that you as the writer can make up anything you need.
Yes.
But the way to do it, my friend explained, is that when you're making your plot is you think of what needs to happen next for the story and then come up with anything that works to get them there that's believable. You don't just take your plot and figure out, well, what's the next thing would happen without really thinking through the consequences. And most people just write plot. Because
you mean cause and effect,
cause and effect.
The next scene has to come from the scene you just saw in some way.
Because cause and effect has to be logical and has to be believable. But what people do wrong is that they're so anxious about filling 100 to 120 pages of screenplay is they do plot one after another, because then it fills up the pages. They go, oh, thank God I did it. But the better way to think about it is like it's a statue and it's a piece of marble and you're finding the statue.
Yeah.
It's
and by the way,
play that you're,
And you and I have done this, and all good writers do this, because this is what any creative does when they're, when they're trying to be creative, which is, what are the things that I like? Why do I like them? And then you deconstruct it to see how it's put together. I mean, if you were an inventor, that's what you would do. You figure out how things are made. How does a mechanic learn how to fix a car?
Yeah.
He deconstructs the car and figures out how pieces get put together and what's wrong, what's screwing up.
Can I say something though?
Yeah.
I tried to do that very early in my process of trying to learn how to write, where I broke down Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Matrix, and I made like, and I tried to use that as a guide, and it didn't work because, and I'm not saying, it is good advice. It's absolutely great advice. It became overwhelming to me, but if I said, well, I want to do a matrix, but instead of inside a computer, they're under the ocean.
Right.
The fact that you've changed just that one little thing makes everything else change.
Yes. So you're saying that if I want to do The Ring, but with a DVD, I can't do that because it's just not enough to change.
Well, that is just the same movie, but if you're doing the Ring.
But remember, for a decade after Die Hard, it was like Die Hard in the Super Bowl, or Die Hard in a basketball game, or whatever.
Well, and some people are inclined to do those types of things. For me, what I was trying to do is, like, if I was trying to write my version of Star Trek, I ended up with just a copy that it didn't come from the inside out. It was coming from the outside in, because I was trying to shove two concepts together. I was trying to shove the Matrix with underwater, which I never did, but it sounds like the kind of stupid thing I would have done.
Right. Yeah, but that's your first efforts to be creative as you copy, right? Like when I was a kid, I'm sure you did this too. In fact, I know you did, because I saw a really funny cartoon you made of our friend Doug, learning how to, figure out how to write something. We copy. If you're a musician, you learn the songs that you like, and then you start to feel like, okay, this is how chords are played. And then as you get more familiar with chords, then you feel more comfortable with rearranging chords in ways that are unique to you. I mean, when we're talking about deconstructing, right, what you were just talking about, which is, I broke down Raiders.
Well, right.
It's not that you exactly copy Raiders. What you're doing is you're breaking down what you like to see, like, what are the ingredients in the cake that I like, and how can I use those ingredients to come up with a new recipe that I think is cool. And so you're drawing, like whenever any of us are coming up with a creative idea, right? It's all about creative problem solving, which is like, okay, I have a bunch of ideas for scenes, but I'm trying to figure out how to connect those scenes, and what am I missing? And then you go, well, how did other movies that I like solve these problems? And then you look and sort of go, okay, so I'm missing a scene kind of in the vein of that. So it's not like I'm literally ripping off the entire structure, but I'm looking at something that I like and going like, I can draw inspiration. And it's not just from one thing. I think where you get killed is if you're drawing inspiration from a single thing and you're just ripping that one single thing off. Better artists are the ones who borrow from a bunch of different sources and remix those sources in a unique way, so that what are they? Somebody said it. I think it might have been Coco Chanel. Like, creativity is masking your influences. That's really what it is. But when you're trying to come up with an interesting idea, there's no doubt you're going to be influenced by things that you love already, and then you're going to go, well, what is my interesting twist or take or version of those things? And hopefully you'll get further away from the original source material, but you'll put a fresh spin on it. And by the way, Hollywood's fine with that. Hollywood doesn't want you to be David Lynch, okay? They want you to be like, what's the biggest hit plus a new twist?
Freshly
because
driven.
you're not reinventing the wheel. You're taking the wheel, but you're doing something cool with the wheel that you haven't seen before. You can't make it square because that won't work. But you want to take what is the thing that was a hit and come up with a variation on it so that it's something old but something new. And that's how you go from, like, you got Hunger Games, but Hunger Games was really borrowing from the Japanese, movie Battle Royale. And even before Battle Royale, it was The Running Man, that Stephen King wrote under a pseudonym.
Or just Gladiator,
or Squid Game, which is just like another iteration of those ideas. So the idea of there's a subgenre of a certain kind of idea, and that is the deadly game show. If you come up with a twist on that, 2-3 months or years from now, you can have the next Squid Game or the next Hunger Games if you come up with an interesting twist on that idea. And that's a lot of times, how all of us come up with ideas, which is like, I really love X. Well, what's your version of X? How would you make X kind of interesting or different? And that interesting or different is what Hollywood is constantly looking for, because ideas evolve over time. And so you want to keep coming up with, how do you twist? How do you make this idea more novel? How do you put another spin on it that's interesting to audiences? That's, they don't, yes, I love David Lynch. I do. But it's like every movie couldn't be that. So it's good that there's one kind of David Lynch. It's good that there's one kind of Wes Anderson. That's great. You can't rip off Wes Anderson. He's his own thing. There's certain artists that are their own thing. They're hard to rip off. But you look at somebody like, Quentin Tarantino, who lived, and worked in a video store for years. And it's like, I used to work at a video store. We used to see all kinds of weird, crazy, movies. And like, if you're a creative, your brain combines these things in interesting and novel ways. And that's how you come up with fresh ideas. That's how you come up with interesting scenes. You might, create a new scene from 2 old bits from things that you've seen. And, again, we'll talk about this in another upcoming show about like, how do you actually come up with ideas? But the novelty of the idea, as we discussed, is always important. So always be trying to work on that for sure.
Yeah.
Exhale.
I actually think I do have an original voice, and it took me an extremely long time to be professional enough with it, because my reach was exceeding my grasp. Whenever I was trying to do things more schematically, it failed, it sucked, it was bad. And the only way I've been able to make things work is to just break it down sort of almost to a molecular level, and then bring it back, reform it from character and from feelings that, that I have experienced or I know to be true. And it ends up going in really weird directions, which you can do if you keep the costs down.
Sure.
Yeah. I think we've been doing this an hour.
Have we? The time goes so quickly.
It does when you're on the radio.
We're together, Lucas, I have to say.
But that's, yeah. So I just wanted to suggest to people that, because if they did tune in saying like, hey, we'll make you rich, which we can't, but it's all about practice. It's all about embracing the process and accepting the constant failure. So when you're on your journey of getting stuff as successful as you can write it, I would recommend coverage places that can give you professional coverage. I mean, Charlie's expensive, he's good. Use what's best for your budget. Don't use Screenplay, because they have been such a successful business that they've had to hire unqualified readers. So they're basically hiring other people who are probably even dumber than you to critique your stuff. And they instruct them to be encouraging so that they get your repeat business. So they won't actually tell you the truth. But it is very hard to find real good feedback. And I do just want to say that there's a contest right now called Finish Line Script Competition. And I did get some really good pro feedback from them, because I was interacting with the woman on Twitter and I said, oh, I'll try them out. And the feedback was really good. So I tried them again. And I believed her heart is in the right place. And just from the things that she was saying online, I thought, okay, this person is behaving honorably, and I would support them, because they have a different model. They are a contest, but what they're really good at is giving you feedback, and then you're allowed to resubmit your script as many times as you want for free. So what they're really trying to do, they're really selling you coverage, but if it's good coverage, that is gold. You don't care about scores or percentiles, or, ooh, I got a 7 on character and an 8 on dialogue, or that means my dialogue's better than it's just some idiot's opinion. And sometimes they really are idiots. Sometimes we talked about the economics of this. There are entry-level people who work as assistants, as readers in the business. They're trying the best, but a lot of them are just kids. They're trying to read stuff and get promoted at their work. They're trying to pay their rent. The most scummy thing, I got to tell you, some of these places have these access programs where you do like a Zoom pitch to somebody. You pay $50 and then you get to pitch your thing for 15 minutes on Zoom. And the people who are doing this are assistants. They're supplementing their income by listening to your stupid idea. Which, at least be honest, folks, at least tell us, like, what's the split? Who gets the 25? Is it 25, 20? I mean, what is this? Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. If you have good enough material, you will find a way to get it read, because everybody wants good material. The truth is your material is not good enough. I'm just saying that as a law of averages thing. Possibly it's good enough, probably it's not. My stuff's not good enough. I have to constantly make it better. The way to do that is by embracing feedback from smart people and stopping and going, what am I doing wrong? You know, deconstruct, that's a great word. Deconstruct doesn't mean to take apart. Deconstruct means to reveal the methods of the construction.
Yes.
Use feedback that you get from smart people, and Charlie's one of them, to deconstruct your own process and figure out what you're doing to make it suck, and then go back in and figure out the harder, better way, which is, if you are attuned to your own feelings, you can figure out this feels fake. I just want to close on one thing. I thought of a good close, and then you can close with whatever you want. One of the weirdest things about writing is that we are all very sophisticated consumers. All of us on planet Earth. You know, we say, hey, what do you want to watch? What movie you want to go to? Charlie just saw Batman. I've heard of it. Like, do we want to watch an amateur short film? No. Do we, what music do you want to listen to? Do you want to listen to some amateur composer, or do you want to listen to the Beatles? You know, it is, we all know as consumers what the real thing is and what the great, we want to watch Robert Redford. We don't want to watch your cousin. And suddenly when we get to be writers, we unconsciously know that we are nowhere near close to it. So we just put on blinders and pound away and do the best we can, and then go, oh, look, it's my perfect baby. Everybody love it. And then if somebody says, I'm sorry, it sucks for these reasons, we're like, woo, you know, you will have whatever emotional process you're going to have. This is not easy. And if you just want to create whatever baby you want to create, you know, do the local poetry contest.
Yeah, there's an interesting story if any of you saw some of these documentaries when Stephen Sondheim passed away recently. When Stephen Sondheim was a teenager and he really wanted to write Broadway shows, he was family friends with Oscar Hammerstein. And so I guess Stephen had written some music and gave it to Oscar Hammerstein for feedback. And, you know, Stephen Sondheim is saying, like, I was sure he was going to tell me how brilliant I was, that I was ready to like collaborate with him on a Broadway show. And he ripped it apart. And, you know, he's like, well, you wanted me to be honest, right? You know, and this is the reality of where you are. It's like, you have promise, but this is bad. Like, this is no good. And, you know, and this is Stephen Sondheim, who is like, you know, who is a genius, but he wasn't always a genius. It takes time, obviously. The reality is most people, as Lucas is saying, and as I'm sure you know, most people that want to be professional screenwriters probably won't be writing Fast and the Furious or a Marvel movie. That's probably true. But you will get better over time. Your scripts will improve. Whatever you first wrote that you were really happy with, you will look back at it in a couple of years and go, ugh, okay, I'm so much better now. And then 5 years later, you'll be so much better than that. So every year, hundreds of people do break in. Hundreds. It's not millions, not thousands. Hundreds of people break into the industry. So it does happen. The other thing is, again, if you really want to create material, you don't need permission anymore. You don't need to, because you've got in your pocket, you know, a 4K movie making machine in the form of your iPhone, and you can go make an entire movie, and people have, and people do. So there's really no excuse. Like, if you want to make material and you want to get better and you want to learn how to direct and you want to learn how to write, All the tools are out there online for free. Movies, study them, directing, slow things down to see how they compose shots. And, you don't have to get permission from Hollywood to make funny shorts on the internet. There are people doing it every day. And some of those people are being discovered on YouTube and on Vimeo by the studios. But it's the people who won't stop doing it. It's in their blood. They just really want to tell stories. They really want to tell jokes. They really want to write songs, and they're just going to do it if nobody else is listening. But now we live in a world where hundreds of you, I guess, tens of you are watching this, but conceivably it could be millions, because it's everything, the price to admission got dropped so low, and the tools are so good now that you have no excuse. Go out there and make cool stuff, and you will find an audience for it. Maybe it's a small audience, but maybe that's all you need.
But remember, Nick Meyer's, another Nick Meyer phrase, saying, the audience may be dumb, but they're never wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
So take feedback. Criticism is the most valuable thing. And if you can deal with your human reaction of, oh, I feel bad and I hate this person, you can just put that aside and think, why is this human being bored by my writing? Fix it. You can fix it. You have the power.
And on that note, it's been great. Thank you for tuning in. We're coming up with some great ideas for some upcoming shows, so I hope you'll join us again soon.
Okay. Thank you, everybody out there, and thank you, Charlie.
All right. Take care. Bye.